Coming up on today's show, a young woman has some car trouble and gets stranded in the middle of the forest. She has to depend on others for her safety in the new horror movie, The Watchers.
If you care for your life, you're going to have to run. 5, 4, 3.
Stay tuned. Welcome to Scary World, where we walk you through the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I am your host, Arturo Padilla.
Hi.
For those of you just joining us, don't forget to subscribe up above and say what's up down below. We have one major rule around here: no spoilers. Now that we got that out of the way, there are 5 categories: production, story, ensemble, horror, and legacy. Each category can score a maximum of 2 points.
Showtime.
Per IMDb, the synopsis goes: a young artist gets stranded in an extensive immaculate forest in Western Ireland, where after finding shelter, she becomes trapped alongside 3 strangers stalked by mysterious creatures each night. Ishana Shyamalan makes her feature directorial debut, and she does a good job behind the camera. The movie looks good. All the shots are composed well, and she uses several interesting camera techniques that really help elevate the setting and tone of the scenes. The sound editing of the movie also aids in elevating the atmosphere and our antagonistic characters. There are a lot of shuffling in the forest, a lot of weird sounds, a lot of groaning and weird creature sounds that really help intensify the suspense and the tension throughout those night sequences in the forest. Shyamalan does a great job in her feature directorial debut. She definitely displays a keen eye for some good horror and a keen eye for good imagery. She composes well, she frames well. She does a really neat camera trick where she films the pupil of someone running, and you can see the reflection of the forest, and it's really cool. It really sets some really cool vibes in that scene. She definitely has some talent behind the camera. And for all the hard work put into this production, the keen eye that Shyamalan exhibits in this movie, it shows a lot of promise for her future. She's gonna have a great career behind the camera, and I think this movie showcases what she can do. She's only gonna get better from here, and this is a great start to her career. This movie looks good and it comes off well on the big screen. It sounds good as well. I think everything was executed at a very good level here, and this is why this movie gets a 1 for production. She does a good job making sure this thing looks good. Shyamalan is also making her feature script writing debut. She adapts the novel of the same name by author A.M. Shine. The concept is unique and it is interesting, but this is where she struggled with the execution of this story and this script. She has a good eye behind the camera. Her pen needs some help. The story feels incomplete and could have used more suspense and more tension throughout. Heck, it could have used more story, period.
Do not turn your back to the mirror. Do not open the door after dark. Do not go near the burrows.
There was not much here to hold on to. The first act feels rushed, the second act is very bloated, and the third act should have been more impactful. Unfortunately, the story loses its way fairly early on and never really recovers. This thing is everywhere. It doesn't really have a focus. When it does finally get a little bit in focus, we leave the entire premise behind. And that is where the problem in this story lies. Aside from the very loose characters and the poor underdeveloped characters, I should say, there is not much to dig into here. It gets into a lot of exposition dumps, which are not really great, and they kind of force the movie to lose a little bit of its mystique because of all the explanation and all the rhetoric and all that stuff. I think this script could have been handled a little better. In terms of the story, I haven't read the novel, but I think that maybe the adaptation might not have been the best. I think I would prefer her to work on something original next time around and show me what she really has up here in terms of creativity. Shyamalan, her father, M. Night, he did his previous film, not Knock at the Cabin, but Old. He adapted a novel as well, and that didn't work out too well for him. I think Shyamalans can write their own stories. They're very creative. I want to see her exercise that creativity, not just behind the camera, but also on paper. This one completely falls flat and it does no good for her story writing skills, unfortunately. And for the poor story structure and the lack of story and the terrible job handling the script, this movie gets a 0 for story. I think she can do a better job. I have faith that maybe an original story of hers can probably be better than what she gave us here, and I'm hoping to see that in the future. But as far as adaptation goes, this one was no good, and she should really stay away from IPs and novels altogether. The cast and the characters didn't help matters, unfortunately. The characters were poorly developed, as I mentioned, and even more poorly portrayed. The acting feels off in this movie, completely off, and it's a problem of direction and of script. The ensemble here does not help this story in any way whatsoever.
The Watchers allow us to live because we follow their rules.
In fact, it's a complete detriment. I'm not sure if the entire thing was the director's fault, not sure if the entire thing was the actor's poor performance, but there is something where you meet in the middle and you give us this performance here. It's not good. The direction should have been better for some of these performances, and the actors could have been a little better as well. Unfortunately, we get none of that here. The ensemble is really not good. The actors really fall flat. And it's a shame. I've seen these actors do other things that they're actually very good in. And I don't know what happened here. So I can only attribute this to poor character development, poorly written story, and poorly written characters. Aside from that, there's not much to praise when it comes to ensemble. And these characters and this cast completely fall flat. And for the poor character development and the poor acting work, this movie gets another 0 in this category. The ensemble could have helped a little bit if the characters were developed and written better, but also these actors didn't help matters. There was no spark of any kind. There was weird accents and there was weird characters and nothing really worked. And that goes along with the story. Story doesn't work, the characters don't work, and vice versa. There's not much blood or gore to offer up, aside from a very gnarly fall off a very tall tree at the beginning of the movie. The one positive takeaway was the design of the monsters. It has a unique transformation that's quite creepy and is very effective. Unfortunately, they opted to use questionable CG to create these things, and it looks good in the dark and not so much in the light, which works just fine with the gimmick of the movie. They keep these things in the darkness for the majority of the movie, and I think that's where it was most effective. When they shed some literal light on the creature, it didn't work so much. It reminded me a little bit of the vampires from I Am Legend, a mix of that with maybe some other kind of like cave dweller or something. I don't know. But the silhouette looked good. Unfortunately, when that CG came into focus, man, it was not good at all. And that was a big detriment to whatever good they did with that design. It's a shame, too, because that design was really something interesting, especially when the creature wanted to just stand up tall. You saw this really tall being, and it looked gnarly. It walked on all fours sometimes. It went from a small shape to a bigger shape. I thought they did a good job with that aspect of the movie and should have flexed their muscles a little bit more, because they could have used a lot more terror and fright from these creatures. And I think the big fall here was when they decided to opt for CG instead of making some practical thing or using some practical makeup or something along those lines. And for the cool creature designs that we get here and the unfolding of that transformation, it gets a solid 1 for horror. I think this part of the movie was impactful and successful, and they should have definitely emphasized this a lot more and flexed their muscles a lot more when it came to the terror on the screen. I think they held back too much, but I think that also falls in line with the poor story. This movie had potential. There was an interesting core concept that could have worked if the script was structured better. The story and the characters fall very flat and don't hit any of the marks as intended. Unfortunately, the apple seems to not have fallen too far from the tree when it comes to writing these narratives. Her father has had issues in the past creating that special magic that he once had when he came back on the scene in the early 2000s with The Sixth Sense. And I think that this concept here was not right for an adaptation, especially for a movie. I think the idea of this novel was nice on paper, but to translate it to the screen, I think you needed more time. I think you might have needed like a little mini-series or something to unfold and unpack more of the lore. We didn't get too much of that. But what we did get here was proof that this young director has potential behind the camera. She knows what to do with the camera techniques and how to handle the atmosphere and the environments and how to handle the production and the set. She did a good job making sure this movie looked good, at least. The writing and the story itself is a whole different animal that didn't work too well for her. But here we have a young director that's talented behind the camera and I think would do well in a more serious horror movie. And for the potential of the young director, Ishana Shyamalan, this movie gets a 1 for legacy. I think we are going to see some more interesting work from her. I would like her to focus on original stuff if she is going to write another script for us. I would like to see what kind of talent she has on paper creatively, not using an intellectual property or a novel that's already been established. I think that could be the avenue here. She has talent behind the camera. Heck, she can even get her dad to write her a story. He writes pretty well. He did well with Knock at the Cabin. But I think that she's more talented than he is director-wise in terms of handling the camera and visually. I think she's done a couple of interesting things in this movie that for sure will help her get another flick. And she's done better things behind the camera than her dad has done when he first started out. So I think she's on the proper path to having a good career. To tally it up, The Watchers received a 1 for production, a 0 for story, a 0 for ensemble, a 1 for horror, and a 1 for legacy, bringing its total score up to a 3. Unfortunately, this movie did not work out the way we all planned it would. It doesn't have a lot of horror in it. I wish they would have maybe marketed more as a dark fantasy maybe. There's not many scares. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff left on the table here. It did have some potential, but unfortunately that potential was squandered. The story was not good, and the characters were even worse. And that does not add up to a good time at the theater, folks. I hope Ishana Shyamalan has a better project next. Maybe something she didn't write. Maybe she's just doing camera duties and directing duties. I think that could be a good step in the next direction for her, or maybe something original with her father. But The Watchers is playing now in theaters. Go watch it if you want to not have a good time.
Can you tell me what time it is?
And that's a wrap, folks. Thank you for watching Scary World. Don't forget to drop a comment down below and hit the thumbs up on the video. Most importantly, do not forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Tell all your friends and family to come on down. Hit the subscribe button here on CorpseFeed. We have spoiler-free horror movie reviews for you guys dropping every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We also have the official CorpseFeed podcast dropping on Tuesdays anywhere you get your podcast streams, as well as on YouTube. Go like, subscribe, and share. Give us some stars and some ratings. You can also check us out on all the social platforms. We are there, folks. Go like, subscribe, and share there as well. We will see you on Wednesday for another episode. And remember, it's a scary world out there, but we are here to walk you through it.